Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. So I've been experimenting with anodization lately. Hopefully my camera will do this justice. Yeah, what's really interesting is that I bring this light to the art shows. This is a UVB reptile light, and it really does all of these a whole lot more justice than they deserve. I often wonder when my buyers take these home that they don't look the same. They're going to be upset about that. So, anyways, this one is anodized, and it's anodized to 36 volts, and I hold the cathode right here, and it makes this layer of oxide a lot thicker than the one on this end, which is why you get this rainbow color. You got to get the timing just right. Some of these are just from heat, right? This one is just from the mold being heated to the right temperature. I recently got an infrared camera right there, but I find it's not exactly very accurate. For example, I have molten bismuth. Bismuth should be melting at 230 degrees, but my thermometer is claiming that it's only 180 or so degrees. If anybody knows how to do some settings, there are some settings you could choose on here. Maybe I have the wrong epsilon. Feel free to leave a comment on that. I'd love to be more precise on figuring out the right temperature for the molds to get everything just right and all that. I need to test something else though. I often wonder, because I'm using a stainless steel pot to melt bismuth, I wonder if over time bismuth dissolves some of the stainless steel in some way, right? I guess I could take some of this back to... I know a coin dealer who has an XRF device. He could probably test it for me. I know the bismuth comes pretty pure, because I was a little bit concerned about that when I first bought the bismuth. You know, we all hear about scare stories about stuff that comes from China, lead paint, lead toys, and when I got the bismuth bar, it had a big Chinese character on the bar, stamped into the bar, and I got, uh-oh. And because some of the elements that bismuth could potentially be contaminated with, you don't want to be melting that stuff down in your home. Lead, polonium, antimony, arsenic, none of that stuff, with thallium, mercury, cadmium, that's the kind of stuff that bismuth would really mesh well with. So I got a little bit concerned that it would be contaminated with that stuff, because China has a reputation of just poor quality control. I mean, granted, a lot of that stuff is worth a lot more than bismuth, but China has some pretty bad quality issues. So I had a coin dealer test it. It was very pure. But now I'm starting to wonder, every iteration of remelting bismuth in stainless steel, I wonder if it picks up some of the iron or some of the other metals in the steel. I'll have to ask my coin dealer friend to check it out for me again. So depending on how steady your hand is with the anodization, how well you can get the temperature right. Unfortunately, you can see some of that, the temperature didn't go right, and as a result, some of it oxidized in a certain way, or it didn't fill in the mold in a correct way. We'll have to see how that goes at the art show, right? If it doesn't go well, it's not very hard for me to remelt it. Assuming the bismuth doesn't get contaminated every time you remelt. That's a big if that I've never really been able to answer. I've never seen well, one time I had a ladle that broke and melted itself into the bismuth, and then it made a really colorless alloy. It made some cool stuff out of it anyway, but so it makes me wonder if just the regular melting inside of the stainless steel, if it does contaminate it, I'll have to think about some other container I can use for melting bismuth. Maybe a ceramic. I used ceramic at one point. It cools at the wrong rate. That's the main problem. And it doesn't really bode well with the electric hot plate that I have. Or I could think about melting it in graphite. I do have a graphite furnace. But about the anodization, which I really love, electrolysis was one of my favorite chemistry subjects when I was a kid. Even to this day, I do private tutoring. Every time I teach a kid about electrolysis, I bring some silver that I want to clean, and I bring some bismuth that I want to anodize, and I show the kids that. And it scares the crap out of some of these kids. You gotta be careful. But I used to have a big fear of electrolysis, if you can believe it. And the reason for the fear was that one of the first things I learned to make was chlorine gas. And also I learned to make chlorine bleach, which really came in handy at the beginning of the pandemic when I couldn't find any. But I could still find salt, batteries, wires, even graphite pencils, which I used for the electrodes, right? And a weird combination of things to buy for COVID-19, right? But, what I'm surprised they didn't sell is, you would think that if you had a wand that had an alpha source, alpha radiation source at the end of it, you could wave that wand to disinfect surfaces, right? I am surprised that didn't become popular during the pandemic. But I ended up making my own bleach. And I also made oxidizing explosive called sodium chlorate, NaClO3, with electrolysis of salt water. So I had a handful of sodium chlorate powder, and I put it into, we used to have phone directories that were that big, and I stuffed a phone book full of sodium chlorate, and I put it in the fireplace, and I set it on fire, and whoosh, the entire phone book disappeared in a fraction of a second. My mom was so upset. It caused our house to shake, and my mom thought I was going to blow up the house, and she was really upset. She thought I she was also upset that I was spending a lot of time in my room playing with chemicals. She thought I needed to have more of a life. And I wanted to make even more sodium chlorate. I used to have a big fascination with explosives. I've since outgrown that, but I had a big fascination with explosives. I was... Obviously, I didn't want to hurt anybody, but I was very fascinated with the Unabomber when I was a kid. I recreated the kind of bomb that he had at one point, and just the explosion, not the killing of people or the property damage or any of that. I got fascinated with that, and also the Oklahoma bomb. I recreated a small version of Oklahoma. And those were some of the most fun. I think it wasn't so much the explosion; it was the fact that I got to spend time doing things that I like to do by myself. That I really liked. Nowadays, I have healthier avenues for doing that, but at the time, it was explosions. I wanted to make an even bigger pile of sodium chlorate. I was using a 9-volt battery the first time around, just like that one, and I wanted to do it a lot faster. So I took an extension cord, and I put an end of the extension cord into a bucket of salt water, and I plugged in the extension cord, and before I knew it, the reaction went out of control. I wanted to go unplug the extension cord, but I was doing this near our front door, and the area in front of our front door filled with chlorine gas, and I went up to it and I coughed my guts out. Couldn't get up to the cord to unplug it, so I had to go to the basement to yank the circuit breakers, and by the time I got back, huge destruction. We had some furniture there. Everything that was metal was badly corroded. There was a tablecloth on top of the metal patio furniture, and it had been bleached by all the chlorine gas that was produced. My dad said, "What the hell are you doing?" And he ran up to where I was working on this, and he coughed his guts out. And he was so upset. He took away all the chemistry gear. He took away my books, and he banned me from using the internet for, I can't remember how long, because I was reading about all that stuff on the internet. And he was so upset. He was so upset. But I think more importantly, he was upset that I was hiding out to do all this stuff instead of having a more normal social life, more than anything else. I think the fact that I could have blown up the house was kind of secondary to that, believe it or not. I mean, my family is from Taiwan. They very strict parenting standards, right? I think they were more concerned about that than anything else. So I learned to have some respect for electrolysis as a result of that. And I used to have a misconception about how gold nuggets were formed. I thought seawater had a lot of dissolved metal ions in it, whether it be gold, silver, bismuth. Obviously has a lot of dissolved sodium in it. And I thought if lightning with a huge negative charge were to hit seawater, metals would precipitate out, right? And given that gold is one of the most stable metals, it would be the first to precipitate out. I thought if lightning were to hit seawater, that's how gold nuggets formed. And I used to get really excited when lightning would strike. Now, a couple years ago, I discovered that I had, not a couple, we're getting close to 10 years ago now, I discovered I had mercury toxicity, and I took a chelating drug called alpha-lipoic acid to get the mercury out of my body. It binds to mercury and it pulls it out in your urine. And I'm a very visual person, and I wanted to see all the mercury come out in my urine, and I thought if it were dissolved mercury ions, if I did electrolysis on it, the mercury would precipitate out. So I collected about several gallons of my urine. I put it in a big bucket and I ran electrolysis on it, and I didn't see anything. I think it might have produced a little bit of chlorine. I do remember smelling chlorine coming out of it, but I didn't see any. I saw a little bit of a slime coming out of the cathode, but it was hard to differentiate what metals were coming out of that. But I would assume that any dissolved metal ions, right? See, I should probably do that now, because if I come into contact with bismuth and it comes out through my body, I wonder if we could see that from my urine if we did electrolysis, right? This is the Peter Dislike Show. Electrolysis Show. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum.